name is Professor Kieran Conboy. I'm with the Lero Software Research Centre and the Whitaker Institute here at NUI Galway. And first of all, thanks for being invited to be part of this event. There's some really cool topics and speakers going on. Just looking around at some of the other things, there's some really interesting talks on AI and blockchain and digital transformation and agility, resilience and entrepreneurship. And actually what I'm going to talk about today is this obsession with time and speed and the role technology plays in this. And actually it's this focus on time and speed that actually underpins, sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly, a lot of those other topics that you're going to hear about at the Business Show event. So if we think about all of those different technologies that we're hearing about at this event, an underlying assumption is that speed is good, and speed underpins an awful lot of these things. So if we think about digital transformation, for example, there's an assumption that we need to do this transformation quickly, or at least even if we don't do it quickly, the digital transformation will enable us then with the subsequent technology to enable us to make quicker decisions. When we think of agility and resilience, there's an underlying assumption that to be agile, you need to respond quickly. With AI, blockchain, and other types of technologies, I mean, again, the benefits of these technologies vary, but inevitably, the usual selling point comes down to the ability of AI or blockchain or whatever to allow us to conduct transactions more quickly, to make decisions more quickly, and to do more with less. And that's not surprising, because if we think generally, there is a move towards an assumption that we live in an accelerated world, and that speed and acceleration in this world is a good thing. So if you go to your local bookstore, you'll see a range of self-help books about telling us that we need to be faster and more productive. There's a huge amount of emphasis on social media around performative workaholism, where there's almost it's a badge of honor to be working 80 or 100 hours per week. So if we then move on, which I'd like to talk specifically about is the role that technology plays in achieving this speed. So let's take, for example, the assumption that this speed is good, which I personally don't. But let's say that increased speed, increased productivity, etc., is a good thing. This assumption then that technology plays a enabling role in achieving this speed and productivity is at best questionable. So if we think about this role and relationship between time and technology throughout history, it's actually always been a troubled relationship. So in the very dawn of time, when we first used sundials in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, one of the big problems is we often think about how revolutionary that was and how it enabled us to structure and manage our day. But unfortunately, the reality is, the sundial didn't really work in places where there was no sun. So for most of the year in Ireland, for example, when we're covered in cloud and rain and so on, and during the winter months, the sundial is effectively of very little use. If we move on then through the centuries to the rise of the mechanical clock, and we'll say the 12th and 13th centuries, you suddenly saw this idea of a mechanical clock that would be in the middle of all of these different cities like Paris and Rome and so on. And the bell would toll at the top of every hour. So again, regardless of the weather, it would tell everyone what time of day it is and allow them to manage their time. The problem is for many, many years when these emerged first, these bells weren't that accurate. These clocks, the mechanics in them weren't that accurate. And so they'd be 15 minutes out either way. So the real problem that you would have here is, imagine it across the city of Paris. If you have a bell that could be plus or minus 15 minutes in terms of accuracy, it basically meant that bells were ringing across Paris from a quarter to the hour until a quarter past. They were ringing for as long as they weren't in every single hour. So, okay, those are a little tongue-in-cheek, and if we leave them to one side, we've obviously developed a lot since then. But even now, if we look at the relationship between our time and technology, there's still some fundamental problems. So if I think of just some very obvious examples, there's a lot of attention now on the use of iPhones and how 24/7 access to email is causing stress and anxiety. It's disrupting our rhythms and our sleep patterns because the light in the iPhone is messing with our biological rhythms. You have games and algorithms contained within mobile games that are specifically designed to look at every element of your temporal behavior and identify the seconds and minutes and hours when you're at your weakest, when you might just play one more game, or for example, in the case of mobile gambling, put on one more bet. And even if we look at the image here at the bottom left, we see where so many people are paying so much attention to their phones, they're not paying attention to the most basic safety things around them. So time and technology has always been a fractious relationship. So what we decided to do was look at all elements of technology and how it manages people's time. So we surveyed over 2,100 people, 2,150 people across 520 teams. We looked at teams in large multinationals. We looked at SMEs. We looked at people that work in kind of the gig economy and all of those students, retired people. We took a broad range of the demographic. And we looked at all of the different methods and technologies that they're currently using to help guide and manage their time. So we covered everything from contemporary agile, flow, DevOps, development methods. We looked at really cool apps you get on your phone, like Pomodoros and zero inbox approaches and so on. We looked at very basic things like people's calendars and how they use and interact with their calendars. And then we looked at really advanced uses of cool stuff like AI and analytics. So we took a broad range from the very basic to the very advanced, to the very time specific, to the individual oriented tools, to very broad team-based tools. And the really frightening thing is, across all of them, there was no evidence at all of any impact on speed or productivity overall. There's no one magic tool or technique that you could say achieved that. Now, certainly, there was quite a lot of evidence that these technologies affect behavior, even though that was quite mixed. But that's quite obvious. I mean, if you tell people to use a certain technology or to behave and organize their time in a certain way, then obviously some people are going to do that. And then again, some people won't. But the fact that none of them, or none of the technologies, or none of the processes that we studied were found to irrevocably demonstrate an effect on outcome is quite worrying. And actually, if I had to look for some consistent findings actually across most, if not all of the technologies, was that even where people saw very little outcome in terms of positive impact on speed or productivity, there was certainly elements in almost all technologies that they somehow contributed to stress and anxiety, in some cases in very small, or at least perceived small ways, but in some cases in really significant, very stressful ways, and massive impacts on some people. So again, we only have a short amount of time, but I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to talk about some of the reasons why this technology is not working and is not helping to manage people's time better. So the first one, and a very simple one, is this idea of an unsustainable pace. So technology is quite good in the short term in terms of optimizing your work. It tells you how you're using your time, how you're not using the time, how you could tweak it and get an extra few minutes here or there, or get an extra little thing done, an extra few emails answered, for example. And that's all good. But what it tends to do is set an incredibly high bar on day one, or in the first period of its use. And if we think about people dieting or exercising in other walks of life outside work, it's quite easy to lose weight in the first day or first week. And athletes are very good in the first week of January of sticking to the routine. The real test, though, of something is how it helps you sustain that weight loss or that exercise over time. And the same thing with work. So the problem with technology is, from the analysis that we did, there's certainly evidence to show that technology helps you with that immediate restructuring of your life to manage your time. And it might result in the first week or the first day, the first week going quite well or going really well. But the ability of technology to sustain your motivation and sustain that level of work over a period of time is a very difficult thing to do. And from the technologies we looked at, none of them are actually doing that. A second problem is that some of these technologies result in an overemphasis on small tasks. So if we think of agile methods, or if we think about these, Pomodoros and prioritized to-do lists, they break your day down into little half-hour chunks, and they ask you to bite off a small piece and do those small pieces that are most important for that day. And some of them actually work quite well in doing that. The big problem with those is, it works very well for our small things like our emails or like our little short reports that we need to do. But unfortunately, in most of our working lives, there's big things that need to get done as well. And very often those are the things that we tend to put off and struggle to build up a motivation or an appetite to tackle. And it's those very things that these technologies put to one side. They prioritize you getting stuff done immediately and the short-term nature of work and smaller tasks. The third thing is that causes a problem in some cases is that, unfortunately, a lot of us live in a very ephemeral world. So, you know, like the photograph of the flower in the bottom left-hand corner, you know, things are just, you know, one gust of wind and we're moving in different directions. When you look at work and social media and Twitter and so on, we're constantly reacting and adapting and moving and shaping. And, you know, for a lot of us, our day's work at the end of the day, when we look back, is nothing like we thought it was going to be at the start. And that's the nature of in a lot of work. Think of frontline staff in the COVID crisis, for example. They're not facing a nice, simple, structured day. They're being pushed to the limits in all aspects. And so the problem with technology is technology tries to put a structure over that work, and it tries to put some level of discipline and rigor. And in some cases that works really well for us and is really, really helpful for us. But for many people, actually, it just doesn't fit. You can't actually make something that is ephemeral and isn't structured into something that fits into nice, neat little boxes. The final one then is probably the biggest issue. So one of the solutions that technology usually does to try and structure us, when we look at all of our rhythms, is to impose a rhythm. So if we take an average a person's day, you might have, for example, a commute to work, and you might have to leave for work at a certain time in order to beat the traffic. You then have the rhythms of the school run and your children, or other people, partners or parents that you're dependent on. You then have the rhythms of your colleagues, your co-workers, and those might be in different geographical regions. Then you have people who enjoy coffee breaks and different routines at different times of the day as well. So we've all of these really, really complex rhythms going on, and all of them are fighting and battling to dominate our day and distract us and take us away from what we're doing. And what technology does is try to overcome all of those rhythms and those dominant rhythms, biological rhythms, by imposing another one on top. And typically, the technologies that try to impose another rhythm don't work, because there's no technology is going to trump, you bringing your child to school or looking after your child when they're sick, or when if the norm is to go for coffee at a certain time, no technology is going to dissuade you from doing that. So these four things, individually and collectively, explain at least some of the reasons why technology is not playing a good role in managing our time and not doing what it's supposed to do so far. So then, in terms of some overall takeaways from today, of course, technology, there's a wide variety of technologies in existence, and so it's hard. It's not easy to just tar them all with the same brush. So the first thing is think about your technology and what you want to use it for. And when you do that, then don't assume that speed is good, or that even if speed is good, that technology necessarily improves it. So when you hear that your company should invest in AI or blockchain or the latest time management tool or the latest iPhone, and the arguments are that it allows you to do more with less, be more productive, do X faster, then maybe just step back and question, do you want to go that much faster? And if so, is this the right technology to do it? The second suggestion we would have from today and from our research is that don't always go with the fastest technology. Actually, there's some technology that looks slower, but actually helps you with other better aspects of time, like rhythm and disruptions of work. So to give an analogy, again, from exercise, for example, it's not about the technology that allows an athlete to run the fastest and get up to a full marathon pace or whatever, the fastest. It's actually about how you can use technology to work on a rhythm of training. And when you have disruptions like nights out or when you break a diet or whatever, it's the technology that gets you back on track after that disruption that's really good. So it's rare that the fastest technology or the one with the most immediate results in terms of speed is the one that helps you with the long-term sustained rhythm and helps you to overcome things like work disruptions. And the final thing we'd suggest is, rather than trying to get a technology to impose a rhythm on your work, try to find how you can use technology to identify the natural rhythms that revolve within and around your work life. So if I could give an example again from exercise, a lot of the real elite athletes, when they're training and when they're using, the personalized metrics and fitness apps and so on, they do what's called running to threshold. So what they do is they don't use the technology to say, I'm going to run at a 4-minute K pace, or I'm going to run at X amount of K or miles today. What they do is they use the technology to identify their underlying heart rate. And then based on that heart rate, they will then go out and run a little bit faster or a little bit slower or a little bit shorter or longer, or whatever it takes to keep that heart rate at that normal threshold level. So the really good thing about that approach is that it takes into account, if you're an athlete, if you've had a bad day, if you didn't sleep well, if you're running against the wind, or if you're running uphill. It takes all of those factors into account and makes sure that you exert the same consistent amount of exercise to make your training regime sustainable into the long term. And the unfortunate thing when it comes to work, we tend not to do that. We tend to put very, very cold targets imposed by technology on us, and we get upset and we sometimes give up when we don't then achieve those targets. So again, trying to find something that helps you identify your natural rhythm and knows when you're not having a good day, or when you're tired, or when something else is going on that's complicating work, and allow you to then measure progress, taking those things into account. Okay, so that's our 3 takeaways for today. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation, and I look forward to hearing any feedback or further discussion. You can contact me at Kieran Conboy at nuigalway.ie, or my Twitter handle at ConboyK. Make sure to join the conversation online on Twitter and Facebook, Business Show Ireland, and be sure to use the hashtag Rebooting Ireland.